Good evening. Welcome to the Kingston and Islands federal election debate. My name is Jonathan Rose and I'll be moderating tonight's debate. It's hosted by Your TV Kingston as part of their Behind the Ballot initiative. Before we begin, I wanted to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples, and therefore recognize that these lands were used long before Western settlers arrived. Tonight's debate is sponsored by the Kingston Action Group for a Basic Income Guarantee and the Sisters of Providence, a religious order that has been addressing the root cause of poverty for over 150 years. So given that those are our two sponsors, tonight's debate will focus on poverty in wealth. To put it another way, the next 90 minutes will be an opportunity for you to hear the candidates tell you what their party proposes to do about income inequality and the growing gap between the rich and the poor. So the way it'll work is each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement, the order of which was decided prior by random lot. This will be followed by questions where candidates will have a minute, followed by an open session where I'm hoping candidates will be able to respectfully contrast their positions and engage with one another. So welcome. Let me introduce the candidates tonight. On your left is Andy Brooke, the People's Party of Canada. Beside him is Mark Gerritsen, the Liberal Party of Canada. Beside him is Ruslan Yakovichuk, the Conservative Party of Canada. Beside him is Candice Christmas, the Green Party, and Barrington Walker for the New Democratic Party. So welcome all of you. So let's just kick it off with a question that I've heard several of you talk about on the campaign trail, and I've heard in your media interviews, and it's the issue of affordable housing. So there are really no neighborhoods in Kingston where a minimum wage worker can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. To afford a 2-bedroom apartment, you'll need to be earning about $23 an hour and work 66 hours a week. So while you're doing your opening statements, I want you to think about that as the backdrop. So Andy, why don't we start with you as your opening statement?
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm Andy Brooke, your candidate for the People's Party of Canada for Kingston and the Islands. As an RCMP officer for more than 28 years, I defended the rights and freedoms of all Canadians. Make no mistake, these same qualities are within me now. And should voters send me to Parliament, I will continue to stand up for the people of Kingston and the Frontenac Islands. I'm with the People's Party of Canada and Maxime Bernier because we are the only party that believes in limited government and trusts you to live your own lives. We believe in personal responsibility, individual freedom, fairness and respect for all Canadians. And the status quo has been favoring the needs of the few at the expense of the rights and freedoms of the many. On the issues, I stand firmly on our Canadian values and our Constitution. On veterans, my heart issue, I believe in honoring the sacrifices of every veteran and returning to one veteran, one standard. We will do what has never been done before in Canada's history. That is, enshrine in legislation our sacred commitment to our veterans and military through a military covenant. On making everyone's life more affordable, we will lower income taxes and introduce a flat tax. We will make everyday groceries like milk, poultry, and eggs less costly. On government spending, we would stop corporate bailouts like those to the print media and cut wasteful spending while funding the services you need and expect. On the environment, we will eliminate the carbon tax and pull out of the Paris Agreement. It is a fable. We don't believe Paris is the solution to the local and global environmental issues we now face. We will address our serious environmental issues right here in Canada, like delivering clean drinking water to remote First Nations communities. Indigenous issues are inscribed on my heart. Finally, we will implement sustainable immigration policies to prioritize skilled immigrants and invite genuine refugees into the country while stopping illegitimate asylum seekers from jumping the queue while sitting safely in the United States. I'm passionate about Kingston and the Islands, and I'm excited to see every Canadian thrive. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andy. Mark.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you to the organizers of tonight's debate, including the action group that's been pushing the issue of the basic income guarantee, and the Sisters of Providence, who have put a lot of work into putting this on tonight and to bringing our message to the viewers. Having been your member of Parliament for the last 4 years, it's been an absolute honor to take your issues and bring them and advocate on your behalf in Ottawa. having had the experience to be both a mayor and city councillor before, it gave me the resources and tools that I needed to hit the ground running when I got to Ottawa. It's how I knew exactly who to go to talk to about reopening the prison farms. It's about how I knew how to work with the mayor and city council to get money to fund the third crossing. And what I offer, if re-elected, is that continued experience of pushing forward with the issues on the agenda of both Kingstonians and City Council so that we can continue to make our community an even better place to live. The two issues that I see as key issues in this particular election, and I think go to the issue that we're here to discuss tonight, are pharmacare, or healthcare generally speaking, and affordable housing. Kingston has one of the smallest, or has one of the lowest vacancy rates in Canada for housing, and what we need to do is to make sure that we use the tools that the federal government has already set up, like the National Housing Strategy, to tap into resources and money to build more affordable housing right here in Kingston. And this is everything from rent geared to income, right up the spectrum to affordable mortgages. When it comes to healthcare, one of the things that we're talking about is pharmacare. The reality of the situation is there are a lot of people right here in our community who are making the decision between buying their medication or taking their full subscription, or taking their full prescription, I should say, or paying rent or buying food. This is something we need to talk about. We also need to talk about getting access to family doctors, which a lot of Kingstonians don't have. And I look forward to tonight's discussion, Jonathan, under your direction, so that we can further talk about these issues.
Thank you, Mark. Ruslan.
Thank you all for this opportunity. My name is Ruslan Yakovichuk. I immigrated to Canada 2005 under skilled worker program as a Finnish carpenter. I'm originally from Western Ukraine. I grew up under Soviet Union regime, under communist regime, and I have very sharp memories about that regime and about bad economy. After I immigrated to Portugal, I see a difference between the regime I was and European politics and economy. So then I always want to live in Canada. I know, in fact, Canada the #1 place and a safe place and place you can achieve your dreams. So also I understand that not everyone benefits the same level. And conservative government policies are focusing towards our lowest income earners. We are dedicated to the affordability to all Canadians. We will guarantee the funding to providing of healthcare and social programs. And we will increase at least 3% a year. We are committed to expanding our economy. If we have strong economy, we will have money for all social programs to help low-income people, middle class, and businesses. And finally, a conservative government will act ethically and will honor our commitments in all areas. Again, thank you all for this opportunity, and I'm here to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Candace.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. The Green Party of Canada is dedicated to rooting out the systemic drivers of poverty. While tax benefits are being touted by other governments' platforms, they're complex to administer, they're expensive, and for people who are our most vulnerable, they are often punitive. The Green Party wants to alleviate, in particular, child poverty and address child wellness and youth wellness for all of our young citizens. The reason behind this is epigenetics. It's a science whereby stress gets under the skin. And so as long as we have child poverty rates that are 9.5 to 17%, each of those children is at a disadvantage moving forward into their future in terms of their right to health, their right to justice, their ability to complete school, and that needs to be addressed. So we have a completely costed platform that looks at dealing with low wages, insufficient income assistance, precarious employment, people living in the gig economy, the housing sector, which is in crisis here, access to universal childcare, and ensuring that the people who are the most vulnerable will be protected. With respect to climate change and the climate emergency, it is those very vulnerable populations who are the most at risk. And we need to ensure that we level the playing field for all of our citizens, regardless of their gender, race, ableism, etc. The Greens are committed to the future. We are the party of the future. And between addressing the climate crisis and creating good green jobs, we will also fight for social justice and ensure that no Canadian is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Barrington.
I want to thank the organizers of this debate and the moderators and the audience for their questions, as well as for the opportunity to speak on the important issue of income security in the Kingston region, our province, and across the country. I would like to recognize that we are on the traditional lands of the Mississauga of the Ojibways and the shared territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We know that Canadians are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. There are many reasons for this, but the main one is that over time, the economy has been tilted in favor of the few at the top at the expense of the many, ordinary Canadian men and women. The NDP was founded by and for working men and women, and income security for the many has always been an integral part of who we are. This is not new for our party. The challenges that we face are many. The growing gap between the super wealthy and the rest of us, the emergence of the gig economy, and the Uberization of work, the attack on the union movement and collective bargaining, and the inequalities that are part of an all-encompassing climate crisis, to name but a few, are some of the defining issues of our time. It's up to us to decide what kind of society we want to build and leave for our children. The NDP is running on a comprehensive platform of measures designed to combat income insecurity and growing inequality. If elected to government, we will make housing more affordable and accessible to address the reality that we have one of the lowest vacancy rates in Canada at 0.6%. We will implement a universal pharmacare program and head-to-toe health care, including dental and vision care, as well as mental health services, support a basic income pilot program, pay federal employees a fair wage, and put more money into post-secondary education and job training as an integral part of our climate change strategy. In this election, we are fighting for everyday Canadians and for our climate, and we have a plan to do it.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for your opening statements. And I'm so enthusiastic and eager for this, I tipped my hand about the first question. So we will go back to that, and it's on affordable housing. And I think all the candidates would agree that affordable housing is an acute problem, not only here, but around the country. As I mentioned, that in order to afford a two-bedroom apartment here in Kingston, you'd need to be earning about $23 a week and an hour and work 66 hours a week. It's just not sustainable. So my question is, and we'll start with Andy Brooke, and each candidate will have 1 minute to answer, and then we'll go into a broad scrum where the candidates can engage one another. My question is, how will you prioritize investments in affordable housing, and what will you do to address what is widely recognized as a national housing crisis?
Thank you, Jonathan. This is really appropriate. My personal starting point on this issue is there is no moral or social justification for homelessness. And of course, with that issue, of course, comes affordability of housing and accessibility to housing, because homelessness is just a step removed away from that. And Jonathan's statistic that he shared with us, other statistics where the rule of thumb is approximately 30% of your income should be put toward housing. Presently in Toronto, if you make $45,498, you're putting away 40% of your income. In Calgary, it's 62%, and in Charlottetown, where low-income renters at $21,300 are putting away 62%. So you're correct, Jonathan. This is right across the country. Kingston, I know, is looking at doing 80 units for $200,000 a piece, and that's on the city dime. And I can see I'm just about out of time, but I'd like to come back and address this a little later in the scrum.
Great. Thank you very much. Mark.
Jonathan, in City Council's strategic plan that they set up right after being elected, they had indicated that they're looking for roughly $13 million from both the provincial and federal government in order to build affordable housing in Kingston. So the question is, where does that money come from? The federal government already has a $40 billion plan. That was a 10-year plan over, it was a $40 billion plan over 10 years. And it's a matter of tapping into some of that money, working with the city, like I was able to on other projects that they've advanced, so that we can get some of that money to start building right here in Kingston. It's money that's being controlled by the CMHC, the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, and they're working with municipalities, they're working with stakeholders, working with various different interested parties in building affordable housing to make that happen. I will say my very first introduction into anything even before politics was on the City of Kingston's Affordable Housing Committee, where I learned that affordable housing is really, everything on the spectrum, and we can't just focus on rent geared to income. We also need to look at affordable mortgages and everything right along the spectrum, and I think it requires a holistic approach.
Great, thank you very much. Ruslan.
As many you know, I'm in first hand, I'm builder, I'm a small business owner here in Kingston. So I know we have a big problem, but the problem I see, first of all, red tape. We have to reduce red tape from all levels, and the life very expensive. So for example, lumber, labor, when everything up, we shortest skill trade here in Kingston. So for example, we used to could build houses for like $150 square feet. Now it's double, triple. So, and all people retiring, so we have no replacement, so we have no competition. And the carbon tax just push cost for gas, for materials. So we're gonna focus to lower tax for everybody, make life more affordable so people actually can afford it.
Great, thank you very much. Candace.
So the Greens have a holistic approach to this issue. A lot of it really is looking at housing needs beyond rental assistance. Now, we are committing $750 million to infuse into rental assistance upon being elected. But we also have a national co-investment fund of $750 million as well to invest in new builds. What I'm most excited about, however, is a pledge to reintroduce the concept of co-op housing, using a housing first model, and also creating supportive housing. What that means is not just looking at housing stock, but looking at the issues facing certain populations. So whether that's youth who need mental health and addiction supports, or seniors who need community and medical supports, there are ways of incorporating this into builds and into neighborhoods that will make them much more holistic in terms of the people that they will serve as well as house.
Thank you very much. Barrington.
I was out knocking doors about a week or so ago, and one of the things that struck me from many of the voters here in Kingston, many of the citizens, is that there's a great deal of anxiety about housing and the precarity of securing safe housing and affordable housing. There are many people that I spoke to that were worried about being evicted from their apartments, and it seemed to me as if this is a serious issue that needs to be addressed by the political leadership in our city, and in our province and in our country. The NDP is aware of the housing crisis that exists here in Kingston and across the country, and we are going to pledge 500,000 units of affordable housing, and we're going to get the government back into the business, 500,000 units nationwide, and we're going to get back into the business of building housing in this country. We also are going to offer, for those who are lucky enough to be able to buy, a $1,500 tax credit, doubling the current tax credit for first-time home buyers.
Okay, great, thank you. We've heard a real diverse view of the party's positions on this important issue. I want to open it up for any thoughts or comments any of you have from what you've heard from your colleagues.
I'll do that.
Mark.
I don't know if it's, maybe you're looking for more. I just want to say that I agree completely with Candace's point about co-op housing. When I was mayor, I went on a tour with one of the city councillors who runs a co-op housing, and to see the model and the way that it works truly is a great model, because it puts the the tenants in the position of running the housing. But even more importantly, what it does is it helps to break down some stereotypes around affordable and social housing, because in order for that co-op model to work, you really need to have people that are paying market rent, and you also need to have people that are paying subsidized rent, people that might be putting more personal hours into the co-op than those that don't. And I think that, I agree totally with Candace. This is a model that has to be looked at throughout the country. And through the National Housing Strategy that the federal government set up about a year ago, it specifically discusses and promotes the co-op model as one of those ways to do it. It's a great opportunity to advance the affordable housing needs in a holistic and integrated way.
Mark has touched on an excellent point, the income integrated aspect of it, and of course so is Barrington and Candace. The other aspect here that I want to make sure it comes out is there's an immigration component to this as well. Presently, we're taking in Canada, the current number is the province of Nova Scotia every 3 years, or the province of Manitoba every 4 years. Those people are settling largely in the large urban centers like Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. And of course, from there is pressure that goes outward, and that is also affecting the availability and affordability of housing as well. So just throw that out there for the moment to consider.
I think we really need to seriously talk, though, about market rents, and certainly in this community. We have a bit of an oligarchy here, and I really feel that from the federal level down to the municipal level as well, I mean, at what point do we stop with rental assistance and really take a hard look at the market rents and whether or not maybe some people are just making too much money on the backs of the poor?
And do you have a solution to that? What would you propose that the government do?
Well, so one of the things that has been proposed with the Greens, and it's not new, is a market basket measure in terms of how you measure basically affordability of living in a particular community. And I think if we did that across this country, we would see there are pockets where really and truly the rents are ridiculous because of a lot of it is foreign speculation. So I would disagree that it's immigrants coming here that are pushing up the housing crisis, and more so that we have foreign investors
Candace, to be clear,
that are buying up real estate to then have it for speculation that is being left vacant.
To be clear and to clarify, I wasn't saying immigration was causing it. I said it was one consideration.
All right.
Barrington, you wanted to jump in here.
Well, I mean, Candace weighed in on an issue that also I found rather troubling as well, this idea that immigrants are responsible, or at least partly responsible, for driving up rental rates and for creating markets of conditions of market scarcity around housing, I think is really problematic. I do agree that one of the problems that we do have in Canada is foreign speculators, right? Domestic and foreign speculators driving up the price of house. What we have in houses, what we have in Kingston is the financialization of the housing market, right? We have large corporate entities that are making a lot of money engaging in borderline predatory practices when it comes to rental accommodations here in Kingston. It's a problem that we need to stamp out. So the NDP is proposing a 15% foreign buyers tax as one way to get at some of these issues.
I used to be an anti-money laundering investigator, and obviously when you talk about speculation, it's not far removed to have the other aspect. Again, the immigration is only one aspect of this. You've got exactly what you said. There is foreign speculation. There is money laundering going on as well. So there's a whole number of issues that have to be addressed.
So, Ruslan, you're listening to this, and you have described yourself as a builder. So you're hearing your colleagues talk about the issue as one of...
Yeah, and also I would like to remind, I'm a new immigrant to this country who came here on January 30th and start work next day, walk for 30 minutes, minus 30 below. I came from Ukraine, but I lived for 5 years in Portugal, so I got spoiled by the weather. So then, lucky me, there was bakery Portuguese, so I started warming up there. And I was making $7 an hour. And, so I came here to make better life for my kids, because I don't know I have bad memories. And also, as a builder, I know for a fact, we need to create competition. Like, we don't have enough tradespeople. All masons retiring, we don't have replacement. Carpenters, we don't have, so for example, if you asking somebody to build something, you give you price, they will give you double price because they can't just do it. So we have to stable this. And also the life very expensive. Look, everything went up. I'm getting every 3 times a year from Rigney, from other suppliers, said your travel will increase 7%, material will increase. So we have to first make sure we lower tax, we make life more affordable, so make sure people can actually have some money. Because at the door I met some young family, and she said, me and my husband working like 24/7, we paying $2,000 rent, we have a kid, we can't even barely make through the month. So my focus will be make life more affordable. And also I have in my mind, I build net zero homes. So I can build 1,000 square feet home, net zero, like green home, and we cost with some people from St. Lawrence College $50,000. So I will need help with all levels of government.
Okay. So this has been a really great discussion.
To weigh in on that,
this has been a really great discussion, but we have, and I know that several of the candidates are champing at the bit, which is a good sign. But we're going to move on. And aside from housing, childcare is probably one of the most largest expenses for many houses. And as any parent will know, it can be tough to find a childcare facility regardless of your income. And to make matters worse, Canada has no national childcare program. So we know that cash benefits and tax breaks really don't do anything about the supply of regulated childcare spaces. And what I want to know from the candidates, and we'll start with Mark Gerritsen, is how will your party tackle the high cost of childcare and the lack of subsidized spaces?
Thank you for that excellent question, Jonathan. You'll remember that 4 years ago when the Harper government was still in power, what they did was they were giving the universal child benefit. So this was an equal amount that went to every single Canadian that had a child for each child that they had. So whether you were making $25,000 a year or $2 million a year, everybody got the exact same amount. One of the very first things that this government did when it was elected was it went and said, hold on, this doesn't make sense. We should be giving more money to people on the lower end of the economic spectrum and nothing to the people at the top. And you know what that did, Jonathan? It didn't only provide more money to those who needed it, but the people that really did need it started spending the money right away. They didn't put it in a tax-free savings account like people at the higher end of the economic spectrum would. So what we're also proposing to do, in addition to increasing the CCB, and I should note that 18,560 children in our community are benefiting more from that. 9 out of 10 families in Canada benefit more from the Canada Child Benefit as opposed to the previous Conservative plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Ruslan.
Boy, I just went back to Harper. Thanks, Mark.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Look, we have a positive plan for Canadians. We actually will bring back for child tax. We will bring universal tax. We actually will work, make life more affordable. So we have a positive vision to lower tax for personal people, per person, and for the businesses. So make sure people can save money for rainy days, so they can actually have money for education for the kids, for aging parents. Because at the doors, when I talk to the people, they barely, like 50% people, they really can't buy through the month. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Candace.
Well, the Greens are committed to a universal program for childcare. The funding for that has been costed. I am absolutely delighted because I actually worked for the Liberals previous to this election on the childcare portfolio and brought forward a policy platform motion from the riding all the way to Montreal in 2014, which apparently has never been done before, for a universal program, only to have the Liberals before the election decide that they were going to go with a tax credit instead. The problem with this is it creates no new childcare spaces. It does nothing to address the market rate of licensed childcare. And really, when we're talking about caring work for our children, for the elderly, it has been proven time and time again that we need universal programming to do this. so that the educators have the education that they need to be effective, and that this is affordable and safe for families.
Thank you, Candace. Barrington.
My wife used to provide daycare services for many of the families in Kingston. Subsequently, she's moved on and done other things. But we still get calls from families, even though our daycare has been closed for about 3 years, we still get calls from families who are desperately in search of daycare spaces. The NDP recognizes that the need for childcare is acute amongst Canadians, so I'm proud to say that today my leader, Jagmeet Singh, in British Columbia announced a public early childhood education program, and we're going to fund it to the tune of $10 billion over the next 4 years, and we're going to create 500,000 spaces, and we're going to base it on the $10 a day model for providing daycare services. So we're tremendously proud of this program, and we think that it's something that's been long overdue.
Thank you very much. Andy, last word to you on this.
Jonathan. We're a new party, and we don't have a childcare platform out yet. But the last time I was with Maxime, I actually specifically asked him about the Canada Child Benefit. And a People's Party government will keep that in place. So that's the first important thing that people should know. The other thing that we've done, we have released a platform on, is our taxation approach. There'll be no taxation on the first $15,000 of income. And after that, we're the only party that will introduce 2 flat tax rates. One under $100,000 will be 15%, not graduated, but flat. And then after that, 25%.
Okay. Thank you all very much for your thoughts on that, and I'll open it up to discussion. Any comments?
So
Candace.
again, the tax benefits that you're talking about do nothing to create childcare spaces, because caring work is not profitable. If it is profitable, it's usually not good for the people it's supposed to care for. And so universal program is really important because, again, we've seen, the Liberals are saying they're lifting families out of poverty. Kind of, sort of, but they're still not addressing the childcare issue, which is that right now, in fact, we have even less spaces because when the province moved from municipal services to the education portfolio, we actually lost spaces here in Kingston for underprivileged families. And so the model doesn't work in terms of addressing the childcare shortage. Does it alleviate poverty? Perhaps. But I know with my kids, I went 30 grand in debt for each kid to get high quality.
Let me give a chance for Mark to respond to that.
I don't like the notion that it kind of, sort of might lift some people out of poverty. According to Statistics Canada, there are 250,000 fewer children living in poverty now than there were 4 years ago. There are over 800,000 fewer Canadians living in poverty now than there were 4 years ago, and that is all accredited to the Canada Child Benefit. I will say that we have seen so much success with it, and according to Statistics Canada, what they're saying is success, that we've decided that we will increase the amount by $1,000 for any child under the age of 1 year old, because we know that's the toughest time when the family member who was off on parental leave is trying to get back into the labor force. But also, the one thing that we announced in our platform yesterday was that we would create 250 childcare before and after school spaces throughout the country, and we would also have a 10% reduction in fees for before and after school spaces, which would be an average savings of about $800 for each family per year. So I mean, I understand where Candace is coming from, but I disagree, unfortunately. It's not kind of, sort of, some people are maybe being lifted out of poverty. Statistics Canada says that this is working, and this is a plan that has been working for the last 4 years.
Andy.
Much of what you're going to hear tonight are people all coming from trying to do the best thing, maybe coming from different directions, having different approaches. What I can't do as a member of a party is I can't make something up on the fly. So I can't use the word universality because we don't have a child care platform in place. There may be one shortly. When we form government, we'll have to address that. But I just can't make it up on the fly. I can let the viewer know I'm a father of 5 children. I've got 6 grandchildren. I know very well the expense of childcare and how difficult it is to find a good provider.
So Andy, I appreciate your honesty in answering that question, but should we infer anything in your party's motivations that it doesn't have a child care policy?
No, absolutely not.
No?
Don't infer a thing.
Okay.
It just means we don't have a platform at the moment.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to reiterate that although it is true that the Liberals have lifted many Canadians out of poverty, that there are still a number of Canadians that are locked out. And that's something that I'm going to return to quite later, because I think this is a theme you're going to hear over and over again coming from the Liberals, touting a lot of their programs and the effectiveness and the efficacy of these programs in allegedly lifting a lot of people out of poverty. And those are some things I'm going to push back against. I want to reiterate that things like the child tax benefit, things like the CCB, these sorts of programs have done some good in providing childcare spaces. But given the acute nature of the need that Canadians have for childcare, it's our position that it is the government that is in the best position to be able to provide a comprehensive childcare strategy. The government has the most capacity and the most resources to be able to address a need that most countries, most advanced countries, consider this pro forma, right?
We don't even need to look to advanced countries, just look to Quebec.
Well, sure,
Quebec
absolutely.
has a stellar
or British
model
Columbia.
when
So
it comes
the question is,
to
so the
childcare.
question is, why the federal government? If we have a model in Quebec that is so close by and so revered by the federal government, why such a program wasn't implemented nationally by the federal government? This promise is about 26 years old from the Liberal government. And year after year, Liberal government after Liberal government, we see the same kind of inaction on the child care file.
I was 18 years old 26 years ago, so I can't really speak for what the Liberal government of the time did. But what I can say is that what we've committed to in the platform that was released yesterday was that we would create 250,000 spaces across Canada.
So
before
Ruslan,
and after
I want
school.
to move on, but I want to make sure you've been dying to jump in here. Do you want to have the last word on this subject?
Yeah, I want to say I think Conservative have the best positive platform to help. We actually introducing all the credits, so we will increase for education. So actually, before the government give $500, it's going to go $750. We will give benefits for child. We will bring back credit for so if kids put it through the sport, to the music, through math. So some kids struggling, we will introduce that. Bring back, and we have positive vision. We're gonna try and make life
But
more
in all
affordable.
fairness, it doesn't address childcare, which is the point Candace was making.
Those are boutique tax credits, Ruslan. Unfortunately, they didn't work and they didn't help anybody. And that was proven by Statistics Canada, and that's why the current government decided to get rid of them
So
as soon as they came along.
I'm really excited. There's such engagement among the candidates, and I wish we had lots more time, but we don't. So we're going to move on, but thank you all for your interventions there. And we're going to start with Ruslan on this question, and it's about unemployment insurance. So employment insurance used to be there for the majority of unemployed workers, but that's no longer the case. By law, we all pay into EI and contribute to it, but over half of unemployed workers no longer benefit from it. So it seems to me pretty clear as a matter of fairness that all workers should be able to benefit in times of need. We need to make the system fair for all employees who contribute to it. So the question is, how will your party ensure that Canadians have access to EI benefits when they're unemployed? Ruslan.
Look, first we have to create high-paid jobs. We have to restore our economy. We have to make life more affordable. And I'm here for 14 years, and I used to work for a union called LIUNA, Local 183. And I know for a fact, it's seasonal work. So after in the winter, they have nothing to do, they have to go on employment. So I believe we have to look after people who's temporary off the job and also help them to get a better job. And as a first hand, I will advocate, I will do anything to make sure I can help as an ex-MP for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much. Candace.
Well, EI is highly problematic, and I totally relate to it as someone who, doing my PhD, was part of the gig economy, which means, yes, I get paid quite well as a consultant, but it's peaks and valleys. And so every time I'm in a valley in between contracts, I'm digging into my savings and so on, including taking out a payday loan for 50% interest. And I can tell you, for me, the system is broken when we cannot ensure that people have a means to pay their mortgage, to pay their rent in between employment. it's not just the gig economy, it's the fact we're moving more and more to contracts, to part-time work. I've seen it at Queen's, I've seen it at KGH. So it's not even just the precarious sector, tourism, it is also in our institutions. And so we are proposing a guaranteed livable income to actually deal with that, but I think we'll be talking about that more.
Thank you, we will. Barrington.
The EI system has a lot of problems. It's broken. Less than 40% of Canadians qualify for the program. Less than 30% of women receive benefits. And it points to the inequalities that are baked into the system. We also know that racialized people and young people often have problems accessing EI as well. And it really points to the failure of this government and previous governments to look after those among us who are the most vulnerable. We want to establish a universal qualifying threshold of 360 hours, and we want to make the income replacement rate put it at 60%, and also provide additional supplements to ensure that people aren't earning less than $1,200 a month. That's our plan to address economic precarity, part-time work, and the gig economy, and our program to help lift Canadians out of poverty.
Thank you very much. Andy.
Barrington just touched on the qualifying thresholds. It's something I've heard at a few doors that I've gone to. And of course, Candace also underlined the fact that just the nature of contract work, very few people have the traditional jobs there once were. So our economy is in flux. We're facing automation coming up. We've got a lot of changes coming up. And again, that'll be touching on the UBI and the reason we're here tonight. The big thing with our party is one of our core values is fairness. So clearly, we're not going to ever stand by and allow an injustice or an unfairness to occur with one group and not have another group treated the same. So that's the underlying principle we come from. So, and that's what I hear at the door, is that there is not that fairness going on.
Thank you. Shall we? Oh, I'm pardon me, Mike.
I haven't answered, but
yes.
Thank you, Jonathan. One of the first things that we did in the first year after being elected was to reduce the waiting time that people had to wait before applying for EI. But I would point out that this issue is actually quite near and dear to my heart. My private member's bill that I introduced to the House of Commons was specifically on this topic. There was an individual living in our community. She was a welder at Metalcraft Marine, and when she became pregnant, her doctor said, "You can't work anymore because the fumes that you'd be inhaling are not good for your unborn child." And as a result, she started to look around and say, well, where can I get access to employment insurance? Well, we didn't have anything available for somebody in her situation. And through her struggles, she ended up losing her home. She had to couch surf and stay with friends while she was pregnant. We need to have a more holistic reform of our employment insurance program so that it does not just start to capture the examples that you said, but also realize that the marketplace is changing where women are going into more hazardous jobs than we used to see before.
Okay, thanks very much. So we've heard from all of you, and apologies for not giving you the chance there, Mark. Let's open it up. I mean, there seems to me some divergences among the panelists here, the speakers. How would you respond to your competitors on the podium?
How would I respond to my competitors? It's pretty clear to me that my party has thought most carefully about how to address the problems in the EI system, and we're going to put it alongside a number of other income support systems. I think we've thought carefully about this program. We're a party that takes the concerns of working people and most seriously. And we recognize that a lot of working people now are entering a situation where work isn't quite like it used to be. We can't rely on the sorts of stable, secure, well-paying union jobs that we used to. That's something that we're going to fight for. But as we fight for it, we need to craft a system that is going to reduce some of the vulnerability of these workers, and as a result of policies that have been crafted by this government and previous governments around the way that working class people have been tossed aside in ordinary Canadians.
And it's a recognition that the economy is not the economy of our parents. It's not the 50s and 60s and 70s anymore. Young people in particular that I work with, I mean, it's devastating to see young people working 2 jobs and still having a tough time trying to make rent, but that they're so vulnerable. And so I think the other white elephant in the room is talking about our labor laws and our labor practices and the fact that we have let this erode. Interestingly enough, even at Queen's with 3 unions coming to town, there are still incredible discrepancies in terms of the types of contracts that people, especially in middle management, can get. And so when you're trying to attract the best talent as well, it makes us vulnerable. We really need to start looking at strengthening labor laws and also, again, a guaranteed livable income so that people are not vulnerable, that we make sure that everyone is protected, whether they're part of the gig economy or not, as we're trying to re-strengthen our labor legislation.
So who in your mind is the one that your party should most focus on the disparities of the EI program? Is it young people? Is it visible minorities? Is it immigrants? Is it the precariat, as I've heard several of you say? Where should the focus be?
Anyone on a fixed income. And when I mean fixed income, it's more that you only have so much to make ends meet. And so that can be the young. Again, we talk about trying to encourage people to be entrepreneurial. Well, if a 20-year-old kid is working 2 jobs and wants to start her own catering business but doesn't have enough gas in the tank at the end of the week of having worked 60 hours, that's wrong. It's wrong that our seniors are not able to live on their pensions. And incidentally, we're also the Greens are looking at topping up the CPP, but that's a different issue. The basic income would allow to make sure that they do have enough to cover the rent, to not have to, and another thing is energy poverty, which we have not addressed. The most vulnerable people are living in buildings of a substandard, and their energy costs are very, very high. So there's a whole, single parents. These are people that are making, decisions between, after they paid the rent, what kind of food they're going to eat, whether it's healthy or not, whether or not they can pay their hydro bill or not. And that, to me, is just unacceptable. And we really need to be looking at all of these different vulnerable groups who, again, are sort of in a fixed income bracket in that there's just no wiggle room for them.
Mark, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think that although attention needs to be given to so many different parts in the demographic, we need to be focusing on women. There is a massive opportunity in our economy to get more women into the workplace, women that quite often want to be in there, want to be entrepreneurs, want to move up the ladder, so to speak, but are held back for various different reasons. One of those being what we just talked about, childcare. Exactly. That's one of the very first things that we have to tackle when we're going to have a serious conversation about getting women into the workforce and where they want to be. We live in one of the most advanced countries in the world, yet women are being paid less than men for the same jobs. Now, we can try to legislate that through law to enforce it, or we can create the conditions in the marketplace to ensure that it happens. One of those conditions, absolutely, would be childcare, making sure that those spaces are available. But when it comes to our employment legislation more holistically, I think we need to pay a lot of attention to this resource within our own economy that has the potential to just explode.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments on that. I mean, several of you have already mentioned one solution to this problem might be a guaranteed basic income. So let's move on to that. Former Senator and longtime Kingston resident Hugh Siegel just wrote a great new book called Bootstraps Need Boots. And Hugh Siegel has spent a lifetime thinking about this subject and working on basic income as a solution to systemic poverty. So he's also, although he's a conservative senator, he's worked across party lines. So it seems to me a policy that doesn't have any particular ideological home but might be embraced by several parties. So my question is really simple, and we'll start with Candace. What's your position on basic income? And if you're in favor, what are you going to do to make it happen?
Okay. So the Greens are absolutely committed to basic income. We call it a GLI, a guaranteed livable income. I think what's unique about the Greens' pledge with respect to this type of policy is that we do want to make it universal. We do want to make sure that it's going out to Canadians without strings attached. And by that I mean, going back to that concept, the bootstraps need boots. Our current system, whether it's for people on disability or people on social assistance, is punitive. You can imagine what it's like to have a social worker come to your house to deem whether or not you are worthy of public assistance. So our concept is really universal. It's going across the board. It's going to go through Revenue Canada. And basically the way it's going to work is that people will pay it back through their income tax if they achieve that income threshold where they no longer really need it. But everyone else will be covered.
Great, thank you. Barrington.
The NDP is also strongly committed to a basic income program, like a program of guaranteed basic income. We're going to do it with a series of tax credits and targeted monthly payments. We're also going to revive the pilot program that was started in Ontario.
Great, thank you very much. Andy.
This is where we diverge. I acknowledge there's very strong arguments in favor of UBI or BIG, but there's also a lot of unanswered questions about it. The Fraser Institute had some very interesting aspects about what the cost of the structure might be for this. Of course, with this, you're going to have a bureaucracy. Our party is the only one that is committed to balancing the budget in the second year. I think the Greens are the only ones that have made, not to give you, yeah, in 5, to make a, not to give you a shout out per se, but you're the only other one, and I try to be completely honest, right? My personal reservations with this are, and I was thinking today, there's a lot of benefits. I mean, food security, health outcomes, I was writing down a few, reduces crime, facilitates entrepreneurship. But what caught me was something that actually candidates touched on earlier. There's vulnerabilities to the disadvantaged. And I pictured a sailboat. Sailboats have ballast underneath. That's to counter the forces that are acting on the boat above the waterline. And in this case, I see the UBI as only affecting that which is above the waterline, and which makes the boat unstable. And that's probably going to have to pick up on in a scrum, I guess.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, thanks. Mark.
I'll start by saying that I didn't even really know much about what BIG was until I decided to run in the 2015 election. I had the opportunity to sit down with some of the organizers of this event, and they educated me on it. And right from the beginning, it was a concept to me that just made sense. It made perfect sense, having been the mayor of Kingston, where, as many people would know, the provincial services are distributed by the municipality. I saw a lot of the inefficient use of resources, some of which Candace has mentioned, when it comes to monitoring people and checking up on them. And I thought, this just makes sense. It makes a lot more sense than it makes a lot more sense than so many other programs. What I find extremely unfortunate is the fact that Doug Ford decided to cancel the pilot program. A program like this is billions and billions of dollars. You need to get it right. One or two small variables can affect the outcome, so it's important to have a good pilot project. I am deeply committed to, personally, to pushing forward with a pilot project. I think, again, in my own opinion, that it's the right thing to do, and it's unfortunate that the provincial Conservative government canceled it.
Thank you. Ruslan.
I thought we're in a federal debate, but I see we talk about Doug Ford. So if you... okay, so but this provincial issue, and we have to remember who was for 15 years in Ontario for power, and we saw nothing was fixed. Anyway,
Not the Greens.
what I wanted to say, I don't have answer to this, but what I can share my personal life. Back home under Soviet Union regime, we have guaranteed income. Like everybody had free education, free health care, like everybody must work, and everybody have houses. From outside, look, the best country in the world. But then work, collapse. I tell you what happens. So for example, my mom was teacher, my dad was teacher, so they knew they only get paid $120 a month, and that creates bureaucracy and corruption. So we have to sit down and think better how we can protect from corruption and bureaucracy.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up to a discussion. I've heard a lot of differences in how the policy might be implemented, or whether indeed it's a sound policy. Candace talked about it being done through Revenue Canada, whereas Barrington talked about it being a supplement to income. I mean, these are big differences.
And this is the why, Jonathan. This is the reason why, Jonathan, we need a pilot project. We need a pilot project to. Well, I see Candace is shaking her head, but the reality of the situation is that when you're talking about billions, when you're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars, you have to get it right. Okay. One or two small variables can throw it out of whack. The difference between the proposal from the Green Party and the NDP Party highlight how you could end up throwing that out of whack. So I think it's really important that we get a pilot project. And I'm sorry for bringing up Doug Ford, but it was a program that, I was just referencing the program, it was an Ontario program that unfortunately got cancelled. We could have learned so much from the results of that,
Except
that
that
pilot
it's a
project.
pilot in one area, okay? So,
Yeah.
so again, if we go back to the market basket measure, each community, it's not a one-size-fits-all. You don't just do a pilot in Hamilton and assume that that's going to be the case in Kingston and in Saskatoon and in rural areas in the country. And so there are models in Europe that have been tested for quite some time. We even had a test here way back in Manitoba. Granted, it's a little old. But if we use the market basket measure as a way of determining
So no one-size-fits-all, but we should use the Europe model?
All I'm saying is that there are models out there that have been tried and tested. So, to say that we're going to have a Canadian pilot, my point is that it's geographically diverse.
We could have multiple pilot projects in multiple parts of the country as serving one bigger pilot project. I mean, the point is we need to learn about, and you're right, absolutely, Candace, this is uniquely Canadian, and it won't be different it won't be the same in every single part of the country. That's why we need to study it so that
Mark,
we get it right.
You've been in government for 4 years. You've had a majority. Anybody else? Switch back and finish off my sailboat. The ballast in the sailboat, as I look at it, because in our party we don't want people to be dependent on the government. I said it earlier in my statement. We're the one party that believes in limited government and trusts everybody to live their own lives. And I'll say myself, because there's no official platform on this, but it would fit with our party and our values. We don't want people to be dependent on us. However, there are people that are trapped in circumstances that they cannot be left in. They have to be allowed to get out of poverty. So, let me finish, Mark.
I'm sorry.
I want to see a shift go toward affordable housing. Right now, you've got, and I really hate it, I was doing some reading prior to this, and they were talking about leisure lovers, as if somehow these people would get money, stay in their basements, and watch TV. And I found that offensive personally. What I think you're going to have, and I know because I've been talking to some people who are in these circumstances, and they're all different situations, but I wouldn't categorize a single one of them as a leisure lover. But I could see some of these people being particularly vulnerable. So there are hucksters out there, there's the payday loan things. Goodness knows we need to look at the criminal interest rates in the criminal code to deal with situations like that prey on these people. So if these people get the money, there's no guarantee they're going to use it for entrepreneurship. They may have good intentions, they may not even get the opportunity. So I believe housing would be the ballast. Make sure they've got at least housing that's affordable and safe and secure for them. And that's where I would start, instead of the UBI.
The Green Platform actually does not say that we can do a guaranteed livable income without housing. So we're actually looking at a trifecta. You can't.
Does your platform,
you have to have housing for the simple reason because then a basic income just feathers.
You said you were committed to it, absolutely committed.
We are committed to a trifecta for families.
Is it on your platform?
Yes.
So,
okay, I didn't see
Barrington's
the...
wanted to jump in here.
I think we need to move away from talking about people who would say rely on a program like basic income as being dependent on government. Any more than, I don't think that's any more valid than saying that people who go and use our public healthcare system are dependent on government, right? These are parts of what we consider to be the way that we think about citizenship, right? The way that we have a rights-based approach to poverty in our country. And rather than maybe getting in the weeds about pilot programs or not pilot programs or how we're going to pay for basic income or how the programs are going to be delivered, rather, these are all really important things. But I think the most important thing is that our party and other progressives in Canada believe that programs like basic income are about investing in people.
But there are problems.
We see these as investing in people.
What about disincentivizing work?
Pardon me? We completely disagree.
Yeah,
a program like basic income will actually give many marginalized groups, women, Indigenous people, a floor under which...
But you had a statement, Barrington.
Hold on a second. A floor under which they would be able to pursue opportunities, to build businesses, to pursue higher education, and become productive members of society.
Finland's model just ended this year in January. It was a 2-year model. They decided in the middle of last year to end it because, although it wasn't specifically a UBI, because it wasn't universal, it was targeted, it wasn't incentivizing work in the group. It failed. So now they're looking at an alternative system. So in Finland, it just failed. But in this,
to be fair, in Finland they have universal childcare.
Candace, I'd just like to ask Barrington to help me, because I've read this. But you're the one that, no, it's your statement on basic income. And there's a phrase in here that I thought it caught my attention.
Okay.
And at the close of your third paragraph, it reads, I'll just read the sentence, our challenge is to ensure these communities that we respect their values, and that we will still believe that the world of work is important. And that's an odd thing to put inside a statement. It's like there's two, you are referring to two communities in this.
I think you're taking my statements out of context.
Why don't you just answer it?
Why don't I answer what? I don't understand what the question is.
Well,
ask me a coherent question and I'll answer the question, Andy.
I'll ask you the coherent question then. What does that mean, that we still believe that the world of work is important? Who are the two communities, and what does that statement mean in relation to your two communities?
It means I support a basic income program. I think basic income is vitally important, but it's not an either-or scenario. We still believe as a party that good-paying union jobs are important, and those two things can exist side by side.
I hope that this debate underscores the fact that we need to study this issue. We need to have the pilot project completed that Ontario started, or we need to do a new one that includes various different parts of the country.
I would like to say something. I'm new to politics. It's first time for me, and I'm proud. I'm doing something for the people, for Kingston. But I hear everybody try spend, blow, but nobody talks how we're gonna make better economy, how we save money. Like, we cannot just spend. We have to have fiscal responsible government who will manage government like we do as household, as a business owner. And I believe government should manage the same.
We have one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Unemployment is the lowest it has been since we started recording it in 1960.
So we've been talking a lot about providing data, and it is useful to say, and I said this in the introduction, that basic income actually spans across ideologies. Milton Friedman, one of the world's most conservative economists, was in favor of basic income, and he said
You're being a politics professor now, Jonathan.
Oh, sorry. I'll stop lecturing. But it's important to understand these broad principles. So I want to go back and see if there's any last-minute thoughts, and then we'll move on.
I would like to say, as Mr. Garrison just pointed, you guys promise balance the budget by 2018, and we will have
9.8.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm not going to let Mark answer that because,
I would like to address that.
Because this actually takes us to our next question. So I'm going to give you, Ruslan, the last word on that. And it actually is about taxation. And Barrington, you're going to be the lead answer, to have the first answer. So taxation is a notoriously difficult subject at the best of times. We get lost in the rhetoric of we're too heavily taxed, we're not taxed enough. But I think it's important to recognize, especially in the context of tonight's debate, that taxation really provides important public investments for communities like libraries, sanitation, public transit, let alone big issues like education and healthcare and police. And I know some of those are municipal and federal and provincial. But the point is, who do we tax and how much, and where does the money go? Now, I want you to move away from your party's specific platform, and I want you to talk about principles, because we talked a little bit about principles before. So what are the principal values that drive your party's policy on taxation? In a word or 2 words, then you can expand it. Barrington.
Fairness.
Okay, you have a minute, you can expand it if you wish, or you can just leave it at that.
The NDP believes that over time the tax system has been rigged in favor of those at the top of the income distribution, particularly those at the top 1% and the super wealthy as well. So I'm going to stay away from talking about policy, but our tax plan is looking at rebalancing those inequities and making sure that the enormous amounts of wealth that have been generated at the very, very top of the income distribution are shared more generally by Canadians in the middle and at the bottom of the income distribution.
Okay, thank you for being succinct. Andy.
Barrington and I are going to agree on occasions, and fairness. It's again one of our core values. I mentioned it a little earlier in my answer, and in terms of taxation, we don't target, like we treat everybody fairly or equally as well. So staying away from the party platform pieces, we don't single out a single income group, and we try to get government out of the way.
Okay.
But taxation is necessary because otherwise you're not going to be able to provide the services that Canadians need and expect.
Did I hear you say at the opening that your party proposes a flat tax, and that's fairness?
But I'm not supposed to mention platform, am I?
So no. That's an important
I'm
way.
self-regulating here.
Okay, great. Mark.
Well, you can see that fairness means two different things there. We need to maintain a progressive tax system. The more money that you make, the more you should be putting back into the services. It's the reason why the very first piece of government legislation introduced in 2015, on the first or second day that the House sat after the last election, we brought in a bill that lowered the tax on the middle class and increased it on the 1%. We said, hey, if you're making, you're within the 1% tax bracket, you should be paying a little bit more to give the middle class a break. And as a result, that grew the economy. So, progressive taxation is the way that my core values believe is the way that we should be moving forward and the way that the Liberal Party does.
Thank you. Ruslan.
Look, we just saw the results, Liberal Party, how they insult small businesses with taxation, and middle class, 80% paying $800 more per year. So I don't know which middle class. And as a small business owner, I actually lay people off because split income with my wife and other things. It's like for this you have to talk to accounting, and my accounting actually laid me letters, and I was scared after. He educated me on what happened, and Conservatives actually stopped because Liberals was trying to push 73% on investment, and if they get re-elected, they just keep going and will be no end.
Okay, thank you very much. Candace.
So in terms of the Greens, the word would be equity, which is not to be confused with equality. Government has the job of income redistribution. When we talk about things like the guaranteed livable income, that is talking about income redistribution. But the past two governments, both the Liberals as well as the Conservatives, have failed miserably in terms of taxing the uber rich. They have not taken to task looking at closing offshore accounts. They have not taken to task taxing the huge tech companies like Amazon that are paying zero in taxation, and incidentally are taking jobs away from our local downtown. But not only is it a question of income redistribution, it's also the government's job to address market failures. And so when we're talking about things like housing, that is because far too many people are making far too much money on the backs of poor people. And that is exacerbating the system, and that's why we need to look at it in situ. Okay,
great. So we've heard a real diverse perspective, so I want to give you the opportunity to develop that.
I'll just jump back to what Ruslan was saying. As a small business owner, as he is, this government lowered his corporate tax rate from 11% to 9% during its term. He also brought up the point about running deficits. Out of the last 19 governments that were in the House of Commons that were conservative governments under Mulroney and Stephen Harper, 16 of them ran deficits. 16 of the last 19 conservative budgets introduced into the House of Commons ran deficits. The only 3 that ran surpluses were the two on the heels of Paul Martin's $13 billion surplus, and the one in 2015 where they slashed veterans services and sold off GM shares at bargain prices to produce a balanced budget just in time for the election. The reality of the situation is governments run deficits, and they know it's okay to do it. Conservative governments do it, liberal governments do it. And the important thing is where your debt is in relation to your GDP. And if you're growing your economy at a rate that is quick enough to take on more debt, you can practically and realistically do it. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio of the G7 countries. Canada is in a very good fiscally responsible place. It's why we have such a high credit rating with the credit agencies.
Andy, you want to jump in?
Boy, to be some clarity here. Fraser Institute. Prime Minister Trudeau is
funded by the Koch brothers.
Thank you. Thank you for the margin note, Mr. Garrison.
It's true.
The Fraser Institute. Our current Prime Minister has increased the national debt by the greatest amount of any Prime Minister outside of a world war or a recession in real adjusted dollars. That's a fact. So as you quote the other stats, let's just balance it off with some other stats, and the viewer can decide for themselves how they weigh them.
So of the last 152 years, Conservative governments have been in power 36% of the time and racked up 56% of the debt. That's a fact, and you can get that by Googling that very easily. The Conservatives get this reputation as being the fiscally responsible governments.
There's a reason for
but
that.
No, there isn't.
Not
It's
really.
because there's nothing about what they do. Their policy is nothing about fiscally responsible. What they do is they give tax breaks, which was what Doug Ford is doing right now. They give tax breaks to the rich and cut services for the poor. That's what they do time and time again. That's what's happening in Ontario right now with Doug Ford.
When you start getting large deficits and debts that you cannot reconcile,
Stephen Harper ran
you
up
start to
$160
talk
billion
about
of
this
debt.
deficit, the ratio of the GDP. Now let's face it, if we're all running households at home. I don't care how much of a raise I get each year, or I don't get, or each month. If I continuously spend more than I have income and put it on my line of credit, that debt keeps piling. I can call it my GDP ratio all I want, which is what your government is doing. This is what your government is doing.
And I'd actually like to jump in because, to be honest, debt to GDP, that really actually doesn't concern me so much. What concerns me is that we have the highest household debt
That's right.
in the whole G7.
That's right.
Which really speaks to the fact that, again, systematically, when we talk about these, aggregate statistics about how well the Canadian economy is doing, it's doing well for a certain population. Most Canadians are in debt up to their eyeballs to the
Many
point where
households-
And
if
at the
there is
same time,
any kind of a
Andrew Scheer's talking
Many
fluctuation
households
lowering the
in
stress test
housing,
One at a time.
for getting a mortgage.
people
Candace,
are going to
continue.
The
lose.
stress, look, the stress mortgages make difficult, and it's lose-lose to buyers and to taxpayers.
Candace didn't get a chance to finish.
Well, the Conservatives are now proposing loosening how you can get a mortgage.
That's right.
Are they crazy? That's the only thing that saved us in
But
2008
what I'll add to
from a
Candace's
collapse.
statement, just to underscore what you said, Candace, many households, I forget the percentage, but there's many that are within $200 of insolvency each month. That is not a good economy, Mr. Garrett.
So
one adverse
That is
event.
not.
So whether that's having a sick child, a sick parent that you have to take time
Yep.
off work because, by the way, you're not covered, which, by the way, a guaranteed livable income would cover you for.
So I can see how GDP and debt are related to taxation, but I want to get back to taxation, and I wanted to ask Barrington to confront his colleagues on the right, metaphorically and literally. What would you say to the Conservatives and the People's Party who say that what we need is less taxation and more entrepreneurship?
I don't think it's a question of less taxation or more taxation. I think it's a question of who you're taxing and where those resources are going to be apportioned in order to lift the people who are the most vulnerable out of poverty, to give them lives of dignity. And I think that while I agree with many of the statements that have been made around things like personal debt, for example, part of the reason for that, and as my colleague has mentioned, Candace has mentioned, is that the government has reneged on its responsibility to provide the sorts of services that would not have people reach into things like credit cards and lines of credit in order to make ends meet, right? So that's part of the reason why we're here today. And again, the kind of taxation system that the NDP is talking about, a fair taxation system that targets people at the top of the income distribution, is not at all at odds with entrepreneurship. It's not at all at odds with people starting their own businesses. Indeed, if we can get our tax system right, if we can help lift some communities out of poverty, we can actually spur entrepreneurial activity. So I fundamentally disagree with that way of thinking about investments. I prefer to think about making investments in people and investments in communities. And that's what we stand for as the NDP.
Okay.
And not all corporations are treated, or should be treated equal. So the Greens are very much in support, to Ruslan's point, about SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, because those are the ones that actually generate jobs in this country. And so in terms of taxation, we are not going to levy any new taxes on small and medium-sized corporations. We are, however, committed to raising, for multinational corporations, the rate from 15 to 21%, which is in line with the US. I was actually quite shocked to find out that our taxation rate at 15% is less than the US. But also, we have to stimulate job opportunities. And so the Green Platform, just in trades alone, in terms of retrofits, Labour Congress is talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 million trade jobs. So there are opportunities. We just have to get off of this 20th century economy that is based on extraction, whether that's fossil fuels or mining or logging, and get into the 21st century. To your point, green housing, alternative energy. We have been lagging behind Europe for 20 years and our people are suffering. Our economy is only doing well for certain sectors, not most Canadians.
And let's be realistic. We cannot spend money like the way Liberals spending, because we can have recession and we will have no money to fight the recession. Like we remember under Stephen Harper you brought. Actually, everybody went through the recession. Canada actually made the recession, nobody feel that. And he balanced the books. You know.
With all due respect, Ruslan, that was the economic and fiscal policies of Paul Martin just before Stephen Harper came along. The lowered stress test that we're talking about, that Candace referenced, that saved us from that housing crisis in 2008, 2009, was a result of fiscal policy from Paul Martin under the former Liberal government, not Stephen Harper.
So this has been a good discussion. We're going to have to move on, and I wanted to change subjects a little bit because we've talked about poverty and inequality. We've talked about the indicators like housing and healthcare and so forth, but we haven't explicitly talked about Indigenous Canadians. And Indigenous peoples in Canada have long experienced the pain of colonization and residential schools and discrimination. There's over 3,500 Indigenous people in Kingston, and they are disproportionately young compared to the population here. So my question is, and we're going to start with Ruslan. Who was the last one I started with? I apologize.
I think me.
So we're going to start with Barrington.
I don't think.
No, it ended with.
So we're going to start.
I think it's back to me.
Back to you. This is what happens when you go out of order with your questions. And thank you for helping me here. So how will you work with Indigenous communities to co-develop initiatives to ensure accountability and implementation for poverty alleviation for that particular sector?
So in my opening remarks, I mentioned that veterans is my heart issue, but then toward the end of my remarks, I said Indigenous issues aren't ascribed on my heart. Those two are right there. As an RCMP officer, I patrolled the Yellowhead Highway, which is the portion I patrolled was between Prince George and Prince Rupert. It's about 720 kilometers. I've done First Nations policing. My two daughters are First Nations, Mi'kmaq and Haudenosaunee. This issue, we just had the talking circle, and during that, my party hadn't released its platform yet on First Nations. And very shortly after that it had, and I was so thrilled to see that we are going to finally address the Indian Act, and I know that's something that touches your heart as well, Barrington, because you commented on the talking circle. People are trying, but they haven't got it yet, just the legacy and intergenerational trauma that's occurred since residential schools.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
This is a very important topic. Nothing is more important than the relationship that we have with Indigenous communities throughout Canada. This government, the current government, set on a path to start to rebuild and repair that relationship. Nothing quite happens as fast as we want. This is a relationship that suffered so much abuse over the last several hundred years, but we are starting to see progress. The boil water advisories, for example, 87 of them have been lifted throughout Canada, and there's roughly just slightly over 50 that are still remaining. For the very first time ever, there is an Indigenous school board that's been established in Manitoba and serving roughly 1,700 Indigenous children in the Manitoba area. You know, I think that there will always be more to be done. I think that we will always be able to point to different parts of that relationship and say we need to do this and we need to do this better. And I hope that regardless of what government is in power as we move forward through several decades forward, we are always treating that relationship with with what it deserves, which is true reconciliation.
Thank you. Ruslan.
I was a week ago on a circle of Indigenous people, and I'm going to be honest, I'm only here for 14 years, so I learned lots. And that was the best time I spent with everybody and with these people, but I know we stand to help them with housing, with mercury water, with infrastructure, so they have the same rights go to the school. But I also believe as an ex-MP, I will work very tight with Indigenous people, and from first hand, I will know exactly how to advocate for them in our office.
Okay, thank you very much. Candace.
So with respect to Indigenous peoples, the Greens are committed at both a macro level as well as a micro level in terms of bringing forward the recommendations from the United Nations Indigenous Human Rights Tribunal. We have so much work to do, but in particular, I think what impressed me the most about Ms. May's platform is that she is talking about creating a governance council for Canada that will include federal representation, provincial, regional/municipal, but also Indigenous peoples at the table as equals, which has never happened before, and looking together to look at a timeline to how we dismantle the India Act. From a local level, I think we have to recognize that our Indigenous peoples are highly diverse. And so there is no one size fits all, but the most important piece is a commitment to engaging in circles, engaging Indigenous peoples because they are sovereign and they will come to us with what they need.
Thank you very much. Barrington.
My colleague Andy Brooke mentioned something that is very true, that one of the fundamental problems we have in Canada is that we still hang on to the legislative framework of the Indian Act. That's at the root of many of our problems. And what you see is this kind of lingering colonial hangover, right, that is manifesting itself now. So for example, the Indigenous unemployment rate, despite all the things that you hear about how wonderful it is that Canada's unemployment rate has come down rather dramatically during the Liberal government, is 16 to 23% in urban and rural areas respectively. And that's just one indicator of the problems that Indigenous people continue to face. So in sum, an NDP government is committed to investing in things like healthcare, and housing and education in First Nations communities. And we want to stick to the principles of prior first consent in our economic development with Indigenous peoples, right? We need Indigenous people to be equal partners at the table as we move forward.
Okay. Well, you know what? This has been a really great hour and a half, and sadly, our time is up. So I'm going to ask the candidates for their closing statements, and we'll go in the reverse order that we began. So Barrington, you have about a minute.
The economy has changed dramatically over the past 30 years. It has produced unprecedented wealth. But Canadians are uncertain because the benefits of this economic growth have not been shared across the board. I recently spoke to a voter at the door in central Kingston, a woman in her 50s who had worked hard her whole life, raised her children, and who has done all the right things, and she's still openly worried about her future. She shared her concerns, about the local rental market and her efforts to find new rental accommodation. Her difficulty making ends meet from month to month, including where she would find the money to purchase a car without going heavily into debt. This voter was a proud, independent, and hardworking person who wondered if she would even be able to stay in the city after making it her home for 30 years. The NDP has a plan for helping Canadians like this voter with our commitments to looking after each other and our New Deal for People. We are going to invest in healthcare and education and tackle climate change. We are going to secure workers' pensions, provide a living wage for federal employees, and take care of our seniors, one of the groups who too often fall into poverty after a lifetime of contributing to the country. We are also going to implement a basic income pilot and revive Ontario's program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Candace.
So one thing we really haven't discussed a lot tonight is the climate emergency. And what people need to understand is our most vulnerable people are the ones who are going to feel this most acutely. Imagine what it might be like living this past summer without air conditioning. Imagine what it would be like living in housing that has been flooded repeatedly and basements are crawling with mold and you don't have the money to fix it because your insurance has been pulled. The Greens are the only party that will meet the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change targets, consisting of a 60% reduction of GHGs by 2030. The wonderful side effect, though, is that it will create a plethora of good green jobs. That will involve money for reskilling from the Green Party, and ensuring that no Canadian is left behind, that we have a just transition to an economy from the 21st century, but more so that we are tackling systemic poverty with platforms like a guaranteed livable income, universal childcare, and free tuition for our youth.
Thank you very much. Ruslan.
I believe we have the best plan. May focus affordability, make life more affordable for hardworking Canadians, for low income, for small business, for everybody, so they can actually get ahead, not get by. And we have a real plan with climate change. As a builder, I actually for 5 years built net zero homes, and I try and encourage people to invest money in their homes, and we will have a rebate for people so they can actually invest money, make home greener and better. And I will do everything I can, represent everybody equally, and unite Canadians, not divide Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark.
4 years ago, I decided to run in the election because I knew that it was time for progressive action. Since then, we've seen real change. Over 800,000 fewer Canadians now live in poverty, and unemployment is as low as it has been in over 40 years. Locally, I kept my promise to reopen the prison farms and secure funding for the third crossing. This election, the choice is clear and the stakes are high. We've seen what Doug Ford and the Conservatives have done to our province, and we cannot allow our country to go down the same road. Instead, I'm asking you to choose forward. Let's keep working on our progressive agenda by investing in Canadians. Let's fight for pharmacare and affordable housing, because I know that together we can accomplish so much. I'm Mark Gerritsen, and I'm asking for your vote on October 21st.
Thank you. Andy.
We do not inherit the land from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children. What about the fiscal environment? The idea of big is noble, the eradication of poverty. But add national pharmacare, dental care, free post-secondary tuition. We're not planning for the future if we're spending ourselves and our children into oblivion. Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. Balancing the budget by 2019, end of first past the post are but two examples. Be wary of liberal promises. If, God forbid, Trudeau is returned to office, he will assuredly block any investigation into SNC-Lavalin. People want a member of parliament with a voice and a backbone, not one who is aloof with a tin ear and a callous heart. This is not a lazy river ride. I will hit the ground running. I will immediately address the Phoenix pay system fiasco and begin fighting to enact our bold and comprehensive veterans platform. I'm Andy Brooke, and I'm asking for your vote on October 21st.
And we are almost out of time, but I did want to thank all of you for tuning in and hearing the 5 candidates. And I also want to thank our sponsors, the Kingston Action Group for a Basic Income, as well as the Sisters of Providence. I also want to, as the last word, thank the 5 candidates. Being a candidate is not an easy job, and I think we owe them a debt of gratitude. Thank you also for watching. I'm Jonathan Rose, and have a good night.